Hi, welcome to From Bench to Bedside. I'm Dr. Melanie Matthew, the host, and known as Laughter and Light on social media. And I am really excited to share with you today 3 different papers done in 4 different countries about what happens if you are pregnant and you get the SARS-CoV-2 vaccine. So we're going to review that literature right now. If you're following along on YouTube, I will put the titles and the articles and the figures up so that you can see them as I'm talking about them. And if you are following along and you're watching me, I'm going to be looking over here at my second screen. If you're just listening to the podcast, please enjoy and then take a look at the media recordings so that you can follow along with the papers and or look up the papers yourself and give them a read. Okay, so this is going to go all the way back to 2022 and then all the way forward. Let me double check the dates on this to a paper published February 6th of 2024. And we're going to cover 3 articles, okay? Because I think 3 is a decent enough number to get an idea and a handle on what's happening. And, if you guys have any questions about other articles, please go ahead and drop those in the comments on my YouTube channel. It's LIL_science. All right, so let's get started. These are the titles of the papers. I'm going to put them on screen and I'll read them out to you. The first one we're going to go over is from 2022. And it is evaluation of acute adverse events after COVID-19 vaccination during pregnancy. The next one we're going to go over was published October 23rd, 2023. Newborn and early infant outcomes following maternal COVID-19 vaccination during pregnancy. And then the third one we're going to go over is neonatal outcomes after COVID-19 vaccination in pregnancy, published February 6, 2024. So let's start with the first one, published in 2022. So it is known that this time, going back in history, that people who are pregnant with symptomatic coronavirus disease, as they say it here, COVID-19, have a higher risk of adverse outcomes than women who are not pregnant. So being pregnant increases the risk factors. So they wanted to know, hey, is this going to be problematic? How can we stop this for people? So what they did in this correspondence to the New England Journal of Medicine was they did a retrospective observational matched cohort study involving pregnant women, the ages of 16 to 49 years old. And they looked at vaccination from December 15th, 2020 through July 1st, 2021. In this study, they identified 45,232 pregnant women who had received 1 or 2 doses of a COVID-19 vaccine immediately preceding or during pregnancy. The vast majority had received 2 doses of the mRNA vaccine. That's 72.5%. And here is a table showing who got which vaccine, and it does break them down by age and by race. The frequency of all medically attended events was less than 1%. So here on this table, you will see that there are several different potential events that are tracked, and it's COVID vaccine during pregnancy versus no COVID vaccine during pregnancy, a number of events per 10,000 people. Now, if you look over on the right, you will see something called the adjusted rate ratio. All right. And if that line touches the number 1, it is going to be non-statistically significant. That's something to remember. So if it goes over the number 1, if it's going over to the left in this particular version of the graph, lower risk with vaccination is shown. If it's going over to the right, higher risk with vaccination. All right. So in the first 1 to 7 days after vaccination, they showed that more women had fever, malaise or fatigue, and a local potential allergic reaction. Usually it's monitored as pain or swelling in the area. So normal responses to the vaccine were seen. 1 to 21 days after vaccination, they had more lymph node swelling. Other than that, nothing was statistically significant in these groups of women. The women that were vaccinated did not have higher rates of acute myocardial infarction, no higher rates of heart attack. They did not have a higher rate of Bell's palsy. They did not have a higher rate of stroke. And they did not have a higher rate of pulmonary embolism, seizure, venous thromboembolism. And indeed, the authors go on to say that COVID-19 vaccines were not associated with an increased risk of clinically serious acute adverse events that were evaluated in that list that we just looked at together. So the present data adds to the growing literature for the authors supporting the safety of COVID-19 vaccination during pregnancy. Now we've got 2 more papers, so let's get to it. All right, so the next one moving forward in time was published in JAMA Pediatrics, October 23rd, 2023. Newborn and early infant outcomes following maternal COVID-19 vaccination during pregnancy. So the question the authors wanted to answer here was, is maternal COVID-19 vaccination with mRNA during pregnancy associated with adverse newborn and early infant outcomes? Okay, so now this is focusing on the newborns and early infant outcomes. And let's go over the finding summary. So in this population-based cohort study of 142,006 live births in Ontario, Canada, COVID-19 vaccination during pregnancy was associated with lower risks of severe neonatal morbidity and neonatal death and neonatal intensive care unit admission. They found no increase in neonatal readmission or hospital admissions up to age 6 months compared to those who did not receive the SARS-CoV-2 vaccine before delivery. They go on to state that maternal mRNA COVID-19 vaccination during pregnancy was not associated with an increase in adverse events and early infant outcomes and may be protective against adverse newborn outcomes. All right, so really quick, let's take a look at the summary of the cohort selection. So they started with 182,324 live births. Several groups were excluded, and they ended up focusing on 142,006 live births. 85,670 of the people who were pregnant were vaccinated, and 56,336 were not vaccinated. Now, there are a lot of figures and tables in this paper, but I'm going to hop over to table 3, and I encourage you to look at the other figures in this paper as well. It's going to be linked down below in YouTube, and you can find it in recently covered research in my link tree. All right, so we're going to hop over to table 3, association between COVID-19 vaccination during pregnancy and neonatal and infant outcomes. All right, so they have the outcomes listed over here on the left, including severe neonatal morbidity, neonatal death, neonatal intensive care unit admission, etc. They have the total number and percent in the vaccine exposed versus unexposed. And then they look over here on the right, risk ratio or hazard ratio with a 95% confidence interval. And they have the crude and they have the adjusted. Now, remember from the last paper we went over, if it touches the number 1 or it straddles the number 1, then it is no longer statistically significant by this measure. So if you look at these numbers, you can see that severe neonatal morbidity, death, intensive care unit admission are all lower in the vaccine exposed groups of children where their mothers were vaccinated. And then you can see that neonatal readmission and hospital admission up to 6 months of age, there was no statistical difference. So here's the author's summary in the conclusions. They state that our study substantially expands on existing evidence of the safety of maternal mRNA vaccination during pregnancy for newborns and young infants. COVID-19 vaccination during pregnancy was associated with lower risks of SNM, neonatal death, and NICU admission, and no increases in neonatal and 6-month readmissions. All right, we're 2/3 of the way through. Let's get up to present day with the paper that was just published February 6th of 2024 in JAMA, Journal of American Medical Association. All right, this study took place in 2 different countries, Sweden and Norway. So the questions the authors asked was, does mRNA COVID-19 vaccination during pregnancy increase the risk of adverse events in newborn infants? And then they go on to state their findings. Let's go through them. In this population-based cohort study from Sweden and Norway that includes 94,303 infants exposed to COVID-19 vaccination during pregnancy and 102,167 control infants born between June 2021 and January 2023, vaccination during pregnancy was associated with lower odds of neonatal intracranial hemorrhage, cerebral ischemia, and hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy, and neonatal mortality. The interpreted meaning of this study is that in this large population-based study, vaccination of pregnant individuals with mRNA COVID-19 vaccines was not associated with increased risk of neonatal adverse events. All right, here's figure 1 showing how they selected their cohorts and who was excluded from the group and who was included in the group. Here in figure 2, we're looking at time to death of live-born infants exposed or unexposed to the COVID-19 mRNA vaccine. And this graph clearly shows that no vaccination has a faster rate of death in times per day, and that more children did die after they were born if they had not prior had the vaccine. Just like the other 2 papers we looked at, there is a lot of data in this paper, but I'm going to direct you to table 2. This is association between COVID-19 vaccination and pregnancy and neonatal outcomes. Now, if you look at the AOR, the adjusted odds ratio, about 4 columns from the left over, you will see that those numbers straddle the number 1. For the most part, there is no increased statistical significance in between people who've had the vaccine and are pregnant and people who haven't had the vaccine and are pregnant in adverse outcomes. And in fact, a few of them show statistical significance in being protective of the infant if the pregnant mother had the vaccine. And so, especially if you scroll all the way to the bottom, neonatal mortality is significantly reduced in this case. Now, the authors do say that they are not going to make any claim that the vaccine is protective against these things, even though there is statistical significance shown. But they do make the final claim that this is a large population-based study, and it does show that vaccination of pregnant individuals with mRNA COVID-19 vaccines was not associated with increased risk of neonatal adverse events in their infants. All right, so let's put this all together. So pregnant people, when they get SARS-CoV-2, are at a higher risk of having adverse events because it's putting extra strain on already strained physiology. Pregnancy is already a risky adventure. And so when you add a severe viral infection on top of that, not great things can happen. Also, SARS-CoV-2 is associated with a higher rate of preeclampsia, stillbirth, preterm birth, and NICU admission. So it's not good for baby either. And, these are just 3 papers that I happen to choose, and I know that there are more out there, but I hope that it helps people rest assured that SARS-CoV-2 mRNA vaccination is actually protective if you are pregnant and may help you have a better pregnancy and could potentially save your baby's life. All right. I hope that all helps. And again, the references are linked below. I will see you guys later. Take care.